And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and then next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we are ready to break down yet another awesome week of NFL football. So many things to get into, lots of playoff implications coming from last week's games, Laraib. But as I know you're very ready to get into, let's start the show with the picks.
Yes,
As you can
sir.
tell, I am not very happy with it.
Well, Lewis, you were berating me on Tuesday about all my different picks in the Lions. Oh, the Minnesota Vikings, about the Ravens. Oh, the Pittsburgh Steelers are just too good. And about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, how they're gonna march into San Francisco and get the dub. And you were wrong, 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 Lewis. And that was the difference in this week. And I dominated you, almost doubling your points. And now we're back to tied on the picks, Lewis.
Yeah, it was everything that could have went wrong. It's like watching a Saints game. We got the first game, the Buffalo Bills took care of business, and from there you swept me. I mean, it wasn't a great look. My lock, the Seahawks didn't pull through. I didn't have enough faith in Brock Purdy. Well, he proved me wrong, and that San Francisco defense is legit. And here come the Lions, Laraib. I mean, very impressive win. Now they're just a game back of the Seahawks, who we're about to get into. But man, that was a humbling experience last week. But we're gonna get into a full slate of 16 games, and I have so much room to catch up and dominate you next week. But that's not what we're gonna get into now. Let's start with the Saints Seahawks corner. Saints wise, on a bye week, season's over. Let's get into the
It's
Seahawks.
not over. It is not over,
Stop.
Lewis.
Stop. It's over. We're 2 games back from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they have the tiebreaker. And then you could say, oh, the Panthers might win the division. Well, they have the tiebreaker over us with another game left, and we suck. All we can do now is play spoiler, which is always fun to do when you're a bad team. But we're not even good enough to play spoiler. All we're going to do is make a team anxious until they beat us and be like, oh, that was easier than I thought. So it's over, Larob. It's over.
Statistically, is not over till it's over. But
I
listen,
think I think you're stalling because let's get to your
well,
team,
for my
Larob.
Seahawks, that Geno Smith shine has just worn off a little bit in the past couple of games. He had 2 interceptions in this one. We just couldn't run the ball at all. I said that last week. Without Kenneth Walker out there, without DJ Dallas out there, just the running back, we're all banged up, and we can't get anything going on the ground. Our defense is what's really been killer, Lewis. Giving up 200 yards to Chuba Hubbard and Donta Foreman is just unacceptable. And then when you're playing like the teams like 49ers, who are premier rushing attack, on Thursday Night Football, it's going to be really, really difficult for us. And now we're at the outside looking in, Lewis. The tie really is going to hold us out from making the playoffs against either one of those teams. We beat the Giants head to head with that tiebreaker. They'll sneak in. Like you mentioned, the Lions are sneaking up behind us. We have a head to head over them, but they're really, really starting to heat up towards the end of the season. So, it's looking a little bleak right now, but I can't give up on this team. They've proven me wrong so many times this season. Proven a lot of people wrong so many times this season. So I'm going to continue to ride with them, Lewis. But, looking at the future a little bit, if they don't make the playoffs, we have the number 3 seed from the Russell Wilson trade. And now, if we start losing some of these games, our actual draft pick will also go up a little bit. And so we'll see how that fares for the rest of the season. But hopefully we can start getting some guys back. Hopefully Kenneth Walker can play for us on Thursday night. And this 49ers team, Lewis, is a little banged up. Deebo Samuel has feared a high ankle sprain. And so, a team had a really crucial win against the Buccaneers on this past Sunday, now having a short week to play on Thursday night. I like the Seahawks team. They're always going to be frisky at home against a divisional opponent, so we'll see how that game goes. But for the rest of the season, Lewis, we have a really, really tough schedule, playing the Chiefs and the Jets. And so it's we're outside looking in, but we'll see how the season goes for us.
Well, I think you were hit with the curse of the Lewis lock because those haven't been great this season. So I do apologize, Seahawks fans. But I will say, yeah, this defense has really been holding the team back. And when you have 2 turnovers by Geno Smith, it's hard to beat anybody in the league, much less the Carolina Panthers, who have been sneakily playing some pretty decent football, especially on the ground, which was y'all's biggest weakness in defending the run, and they exploited it. And, Sam Darnold playing decent. But for the Seahawks perspective, if you win this huge game against 49ers, which, as you know, the Seahawks have the 49ers number historically, at least in the past 10 years. Now, this is two completely different teams, but this is a game that, Brock Purdy and in with the 12s raining down his neck, going all crazy. We'll get into that game later for the Thursday Night Football preview, but that's going to be an exciting game. I think it's going to be closer than some people might think because of the past two games, but you're not out of it yet. But things can start to look pretty grim coming up. So it's been a great season though, Laraib. So you got to have pride over that you're outperforming expectations. And you're right, the future looks good. You just need to hope the Broncos keep losing. Russell Wilson just got a concussion. So maybe, you might have a top 5 pick at the end of the year, which is very good news for a team that is rebuilding. So, but Laraib, today's episode, I primarily want to focus on the AFC conference. We're going to go through all the potential playoff teams, all the playoff locks, playoff matchups, who are the contenders, pretenders, dark horses, and everything AFC playoff picture. So first, Laraib, I want to focus on who's getting in. We only have one definitive lock at the moment. Well, actually, technically 0 definitive locks. No one's officially clinched anything yet in the AFC, but the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are 10-3. The Ravens and Bengals are 9-4. Dolphins 8-5. Tennessee leading their division at 7-6. And you have a lot of 7-6 teams. And then we were filming this before Monday Night Football, so we don't know the outcome of the Patriots game yet. But the Patriots are they're 6-6 at the moment. So if they win tonight, they'll be 7-6. If they lose, they'll probably be out of the playoff picture. So, Laraib, let's start with who's getting in. You have 3 wild card spots, which right now are occupied by the Bengals, the Dolphins, and the Chargers. Do you think that's how it will end up at the end of the season?
Well, Lewis, I really can't say for sure. I think I think the Bengals are in. But for this Dolphins team that's been on the slide, Lewis, Tua has not played really well against the pressure. Khalil Mack was on him just last night, and then last week you saw what the 49ers defense did to him. And now they play the Buffalo Bills this coming Saturday. And so when you lose 3 games in a row, Lewis, and you have some teams like the Jets, who also have a big game coming up this week, I think we can see this AFC wildcard shake out just a little bit. Teams like the Las Vegas Raiders, I know that loss for them just was not good at all. And they're basically these 5-8 teams, Lewis. I think most of them are done except for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know we have the Titans as a shoe-in the past couple of weeks, but now they've been playing really bad. Derrick Henry has not looked like himself. A couple bad turnovers for him. And now this Jacksonville Jaguars team is only 2 games back, and they still play the Titans one more time this year. And so that's going to be something I'm looking out for a Jaguars team at 5-8 who can still get in by winning their division, Lewis.
Yeah, I want to focus on the Chargers right now because they picked up a very impressive win last night. Thanks to your boy, Jay Herbo, who, as if it was any doubt who the better quarterback between Tua and Herbert is. And I want to focus on that game a little bit because the Chargers were down so many defensive starters. They get Mike Williams and Keenan Allen back, and they just played great football. Whenever Mike Williams and Keenan Allen finish a game with Herbert, he is a winning record. I don't exactly know what the record is, but it's very good. And it just shows you how important it is to have playmakers on the outside to make your life easier. When it's just Eckler or it's just Allen or just Mike Williams, it's so hard to just be able to move the ball consistently down the field with guys like Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, who are good ancillary pieces who can give you a different look on offense from here and there. But when you need legit playmakers in the NFL now, especially when you have a quarterback of that caliber in Justin Herbert to lead your franchise, and I think the overall game plan from that Sunday Night Football game against the Dolphins, like you mentioned, the Dolphins, it's looking pretty shaky for them right now because in that game specifically, you saw from the last week, the 49ers, what they did was they would press the receivers at the line and then blitz the living hell out of Tua. So it would throw off his timing and even a press on a guy like Tyreek Hill, which most defenses wouldn't dare to do because he's so fast and he would have burned that corner immediately. And, there's the occasional huge play given up. But the 49ers did was they pressed those receivers and sent the house to a depleted offensive line with Tua in the backfield, who really isn't that much of a playmaker himself. And he was flustered all game. And yeah, you can say, all right, that's the Niners defense. They're great. The Chargers did the exact same thing on Sunday. And you saw when Tyreek Hill left that game, he had 3 completions, Tua Tagovailoa did, through 3 quarters of that game. And he looked completely off, out of sync. And they can't run the ball either. Their offensive line is in shambles. And like you mentioned, Laraib, they have a tough schedule going forward. Now, I do think they will find a way to make the playoffs this year. But my expectation and ceiling for this team has gone down drastically, in my opinion, for the recent ways that people have played against them. And now it's December football. We're going into the cold months, and you play the Bills next week in Buffalo, a Bills defense which has been very good all season, even without Von Miller, as I pointed out in our picks breakdown, one of my few wins of the weekend. But those are the tough matchups for Tua in this offense. And let's just be honest, Laraib, there is a ceiling on what Tua can bring your team. I mean, you can surround him with great guys, and he's a Kirk Cousins. His level of play rises with the players next to him. And if the players next to him aren't that great, it falls with them. He doesn't make anyone better. He doesn't pull crazy plays out of his butt. He can't will a team to a win. And in the playoffs, you need that guy in 2022. I mean, yes, you can have a Jimmy Garoppolo who has an amazing team around him, but I don't think that type of quarterback can win a Super Bowl in this year's NFL, Laraib. What were your big takeaways specifically from that game last night?
Well, Lewis, the big thing on Tua this year was just his accuracy down the middle of the field, his accuracy across the board, and his high completion percentage, and just the way he got the ball out to his receivers. But like I said in this one, with no running game, and like you mentioned, just the blitz at him the whole time, under pressure, he is not that guy, Lewis. And there's pressure on him all game long, and he just couldn't get it done. And I said, this Chargers rush defense has been historically bad, Lewis, historically bad for the past 60 years, getting up the most yards on the ground. And the Dolphins still couldn't get anything going. I know Jeff Wilson got hurt. You still have guys like Raheem Mostert out there, who's a seasoned veteran, to go out there and get you some yards, but they just couldn't get it done on the ground, Lewis. And now that was in a controlled environment inside a closed stadium. And like you mentioned, when you're going to Buffalo, Lewis, when you still have to go to New England, when you still have to go to New York in this December, January time, it's going to be really, really tough for this team, Lewis. I don't think Tua and his noodle arm will be able to throw it that deep in the freezing cold tundra of New England. And so I still think they can make it, Lewis. The Jets are on the outside looking in at 7-6. They're frisky, because they still play the Dolphins one more time. And so this AFC playoff race, Lewis, is really starting to shake up, with 4 weeks left.
Yeah, I agree. And let's focus on, I want to ask you, so who are your 3 wildcard teams? And what was super interesting about that game, Laraib, was now that gives the Chargers a head-to-head tiebreaker over the Dolphins, who, yes, currently have a win over the, have one more win in the standings than the Chargers. But what the big difference is, this is the Chargers' remaining schedule. They have the Titans at home next week, at Indianapolis, home against the Rams, and then at the Broncos. Rob, the Titans have not been playing very well, and we're going to get to them later. And then you have the Colts, who should be a win, the Rams, who should be a win, and then at the Broncos at the end of the season, they might be able to pull off 4 straight here. So it's very hard for a team like Miami, and you just talked about their schedule coming up, to weather that storm. And if they tie in the standings, the Chargers get the tiebreaker. And how important is that? Well, if they are the 6 and 7 seeds in the conference, Laraib, you have either in that first round, if you're the 6th seed, you could potentially go to a banged up Baltimore, who, yes, they got their win, but it was not by, any confidence. And if they're still kind of banged up, Lamar's not looking great, or, the Bengals could pass them up, which would be tough. Or a 7 seed who, as of right now, would have to travel to Kansas City, That is a huge advantage for the 6th seed. That's why it was such a critical win for the Chargers on Sunday to get that for a potential playoff matchup, Laraib. But do you think that's how it's going to shake out? What do you think our final 3 wildcard teams are when it's all said and done in this conference?
I think the final 3, Lewis. I think Cincinnati at the 5 is basically a lock right now.
Now, you don't. All right, we're on that point real quick. Do you think that the Ravens are going to win the division?
So that was something I also wanted to bring up, Lewis, because I can see both of these teams sweeping the board, Lewis. You see the Buccaneers, Patriots, and Bills for the Bengals. I know the Bills game is going to be really, really fun to watch. And for the Ravens, they have the Browns, Falcons, and Steelers. And then week 18, Lewis, these two teams match up together, and that could very well be the game that decides that division, Lewis. So I don't want to, say this or that about this team, but I feel like both of those teams, Lewis, the Ravens or Bengals, whichever one wins the division and whichever one doesn't, I feel like both of those teams we can confidently say will make the playoffs. Now, regarding the 6 and 7 seed, I really like the Chargers to take the 7 seed, Lewis. I know you know that Justin Herbert is my guy, and they have a really easy schedule with the last 4 games. But it's their coaching, Lewis, has always been a question mark with Brandon Staley. Just his, they went for it on 4th down, Lewis, and their own goal line early in the, on the opposing goal line early in the game, and then didn't come up with any points. So, this is one of those coaches. He likes to do some stuff unorthodox. He likes to go for it a lot, and sometimes it costs his team games. And so, when you're facing the Titans have not been playing well, Lewis, but with Derrick Henry against the number 1 worst rushing defense in the league, that's easily a game I could see them dropping. And so the Chargers will take the 6 seed. Okay. I believe in Herbert with the guys back, like you mentioned. I think they can take the 7 seed, maybe not run the board completely, but I think they can take the 7 seed. The 6 seed. And then I like the New York Jets to take the 7 seed, Lewis. Mike White was battling out there against the Bills team. I know the score didn't look that close, but it was really, really tight throughout the first half and even going into the second half a little bit, Lewis. And he got banged up in that game, and he toughed it out. And I know that defense really, really appreciated what he went out there and did, taking huge hits to the body. He probably has some really bruised ribs, maybe even some cracked ribs, but he's still out there balling out for that team. And now for this Jets team, looking at their remaining schedule, they played the Lions this week. That's going to be a really, really big test for them. Then they play the lowly Jaguars at Seattle, who's been falling a little bit. And then this Dolphins team the last week of the season. And so, they're going to really have to prove themselves, Lewis, if they make it, but I think they can.
Yeah, this is a very interesting stretch for the Jets coming up, because you look at the schedule 2 weeks ago, and it's Lions, Jags, the Seahawks are decent. It's at Seattle. That's going to be a tough game. And then at the Dolphins, who knows with that game. Now, this schedule is kind of tough. A home for the Lions. The Lions have been on fire recently, so that's not going to be an easy game. The Jaguars just flexed their muscles against a good team in the Titans. The Seahawks, no game in Seattle is going to be an easy game. And then at Miami, who could be playing for this very playoff spot, because you don't have the Dolphins in your playoffs, Laraib. So I think this is too tough a task for this Jets team. I've been loving what I've been seeing from the Jets. This is a spirited team with a really good defense. But I got to call a spade, Laraib. I just think that with this offense, there is a certain ceiling. And I love Mike White, but their offensive line is in shambles. Their starting running back is down. I love their receivers, but I just don't trust them as much as I still do trust this Dolphins offense. And yes, you did talk about how their schedule is tough, but 2 of those games are in Miami, like you mentioned. The Packers game, they should win. And then that last Jets game, that could be the decider in who makes the playoffs, between these 2 teams, between the Jets and the Dolphins. And, the Jets beat them earlier when they had, I forgot who that quarterback was, but their 3rd string quarterback, Skylar Thompson, in against them. Of course, they dominated that Skylar Thompson Dolphins team. But now I don't think they're going to sweep the Dolphins on the season. So, Laura, I do agree with you. My wild card teams are the Bengals, who I'm going to talk about now. I think the Ravens get the division over the Bengals. And I think both teams go into that game at 12-4. and it's who's going to make it in. And I think, well, actually, let me disagree real quick. I think the Ravens get in at 12-4, and the Bengals get in at 11-5, which means that the Ravens right now are undefeated in their division. So they will enter that game 5-0 in divisional games. However, the Bengals have already lost 3 divisional games. So no matter what, the Ravens would win the division going in. I think the Bengals drop one to either the Bills, probably not the Bucks, but one of these games coming up. And so they are my 5th seed. My 6th seed is the Los Angeles Chargers. I agree with you. I really like their schedule going forward. And I think if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen remain healthy, which is a big ask, don't get me wrong, and they just need to play consistent football, because we see a great game plan, great execution against the Dolphins on a huge stage. Now, what are you going to do against a team like the Titans on a 12 o'clock stage where no one's watching? Are you going to put up a game like the Texans game last year? Are you going to put up a game like the Raiders game from 2 weeks ago, where you just come out flat and you can't do anything? If that's the case, then, you could kiss the playoffs goodbye. And then my final wildcard team is the Miami Dolphins. I just think, this team is playing so well this season. They can win the games they need to win. And I think they can get to 10 wins on the season, which will make them the final playoff seed. I don't think the Jets can beat the Lions next week, but we'll get into that in our next week's standings. So those are the teams who we think are going to get in. We disagree on the 7th seed, but does it really matter when you're playing against the Chiefs in the first round or the Bills? So that's where I want to pivot to next, Laraib. Let's look at the top of the conference, particularly the division winners and who we think is going to remain. Do you think right now the Bills, Chiefs, we talked about the Ravens, the AFC North, and the Titans are going to remain the division champs? First off, is that what you think?
I agree that the Bills, the Chiefs will win their division. Now, I have some question marks about this Tennessee team, Lewis. Like I said, 4 games left, and you still have to play the Chargers. The Texans would probably be a win, the Cowboys, and then the Jaguars as the final game. And so that's going to be really, really tough in my opinion. And, the Jaguars just beat them this past weekend, and the Jaguars team, they've been inconsistent all season long. And so I still have to trust Mike Vrabel. These guys, if he can whip anybody into shape, Lewis, it's going to be those guys, and he'll get it done for the Titans team. So I like the Titans to win that division. And then for the Ravens and the Bills team, Lewis, or the Bengals team, I'm going to say, oh man, this is so difficult, because you think that the Ravens would lose this weekend and to the Steelers, and the Bengals would jump in to that number 3 seed. But I think the Bengals win the division, Lewis. I think without Lamar Jackson in there, the Ravens, they won this game, but it was a divisional game, Lewis. And with the Steelers, one of the most historic rivalries in the whole NFL, these teams always go at it. But, when they have to play the Browns next week and the Falcons the week after, we're still not out of the playoffs, Lewis, and they have to play the Steelers again. They have a couple games without Lamar Jackson. This defense has been up and down all season long, and without, any offensive weapons out there, I think that they could drop a game, Lewis, and the Bengals could take the number 3 seed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at first. I want to talk specifically about the Titans right now, because, like you mentioned, they have a tough schedule going forward. And Laraib, I think they might lose 3 out of 4 games. But if I had to bet, I'd say 2 out of 4. I think they finish the season 9-8. But there is a world in which the Jaguars can win that last game, at Jacksonville, which we know isn't an easy place to play at the end of the season when you need to make the playoffs. Cough, cough, Colts. But, at Chargers, home against the Cowboys, and at Jaguars. Yes, there's a Texans game thrown in there. A sneaky, frisky Texans team that might be playing just for pride at that point on Christmas Eve. But I think they do make it, because I do bring up the Titans schedule. And yes, it is difficult. But the Jags, their schedule is also very difficult going forward. And the Jaguars would have to basically win out in order to get in. And then you have home against the Cowboys, at the Jets. They do have a Texans game in there. But I just don't think there's a world in which they beat the Cowboys and the Jets. So I do think the Titans win this division. But they need to figure their stuff out, Rob, because they are not a convincing 4 seed right now. And we could be looking at this team in a pretty disappointing light towards the end of the season if they don't figure their stuff out, because they're going to face a very tough 5 seed who we both believe is probably going to be the loser of Ravens Bengals in that division. And we saw what the Bengals have been able to do in Tennessee the past few years. And we know the Ravens always get up for those games against the Titans. So no matter what, it's going to be an awesome matchup. And then, yeah, for that division, the AFC North, I do think the Ravens win purely based off division record and the head-to-head. Because the head-to-head won't matter. The Ravens already won, even if the Bengals win the last game. Now, it's pretty much up to whether or not the Bengals can get the better record between the two teams going forward. And they just have too many tough matchups going forward for them. You have the Bucks, which, yes, they looked awful last week, but they can always find ways to win. At New England is never an easy place to play for any team. And then the Bills and the Ravens. That's just too many gauntlets in a row. Now, if anyone can do it, it is Joe Burrow. But I do think the Ravens win this division. Hopefully Lamar gets healthy enough to where he is a factor in this postseason, because he's playing for a lot more than just a playoff spot. He's playing for a bag, Laraib. But now I want to focus on the top 2 dogs, the Bills and the Chiefs. Is it a shoo-in that these are our 2 final teams, Laraib?
For the top 2 seeds, yes, but to make the AFC Championship, Lewis, I think the Bengals have to be in that conversation. Even though they don't have the same record as these guys, they've been balling out and they've been heating up, Lewis. There's always these teams who have, maybe start off slow, lose a couple games here and there, but they really start to heat up towards the end of the season. And that's been the Cincinnati Bengals, Lewis. And so you have to have them in that conversation. Maybe not the 1 or 2 seed. But going forward for the championship, we'll talk about the playoffs in a little bit. I'd really like them, as an AFC contender to be for real. But for this Bills and Chiefs, for either one to have the 1 seed, for the Bills, they play the Dolphins, and they play the Bears, the Bengals, and the Patriots. And so the only real tough game on there, Lewis, is the Bengals. And then for the Chiefs, they still have to play the Broncos again. They have the Raiders. And they play the Seahawks and the Texans. And so I think realistically, the Chiefs can take the number 1 seed away from the Bills, Lewis. The schedule going forward is really easy now, as long as they don't loosen their grip on anything and they continue to battle. Don't drop any one of these easy games. I think the Chiefs can take the number 1 seed.
Yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I do think the Chiefs get the 1 seed, because I do think that the Bills will slip up one more time, whether it be to the Bengals, whether it be to the Dolphins. They have a tougher schedule, absolutely. But to say that these teams are on a collision course, I don't know. I love the Bengals, but when you bring up teams getting hot at the right time, I'm beginning to think that this Chargers team can insert itself into this conversation with the Bengals, Chiefs, and Bills, because they're starting to get on a roll here. Now, if Joey Bosa is able to come back, which some people say he might be able to come back for week 17, week 18, that completely transforms this defense. It takes off so much of the pressure off Khalil Mack and just really helps this front. Now, I'm still wary about their secondary, but when it comes to the Bills and the Chiefs, just because they're the top 2 seed does not mean they're world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. The Bills, I have serious questions about this offense come playoff time. They can't run the ball very well, and their weapons on the outside of Diggs, really aren't that spectacular. Gabe Davis is decent as a wide receiver too, but nothing to write home about. And then you really don't have any other playmakers to help out this offense besides Josh Allen. And then for the Chiefs, this defense is kind of worrying. Their secondary is banged up right now. I don't think they get that much pressure outside of Chris Jones on the defensive line. And you can run the ball against this Chiefs team, as we saw the Bengals do. And out of nowhere, Russell Wilson gets, 3 touchdown passes against them last week. 4 if you count the pick 6. But, that's kind of distressing for this Chiefs team going in. And then I think they lack some playmakers on the offensive side. But I do think they're the best bet in this conference. And when it comes to playoff matchups, Laraib, which I want to focus on now. So your final bracket, if I get this right, you have the Chiefs at 1, the Bills at 2, you have the Bengals at 3, Titans at 4, I'm assuming the Ravens are your 5 seed. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Ravens will be the 5.
And then you round it out with the Chargers and the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with that first matchup. Let's start with Chiefs Jets. Is that a complete wash?
So that
Is
will
that
be
a
the
blowout?
Bills Jets.
Bills Jets, excuse me. How does
Well,
that game go down in Buffalo? We just saw it last weekend.
yeah, that's going to be a really, really tight game. It's going to be a big test for this Bills team, Lewis. But I will say the Bills will eke this one out just based off their pedigree and their coaching. Sean McDermott's been to the playoffs a couple times. They had some bad losses, but I think this one against the Jets, they've been on a tear this season, Lewis. The defense is playing really well, but I think the Bills can get it done for that first playoff game. It's going to be a really tight game, defensive battle once again. But Josh Allen is able to get it done with Stephon Diggs and Mike White. The White Lotus director himself is packing his bags and going home.
He's pulling a Tanya and he's just leaving the cast. I hope you get that. All right, and then your next matchup, you have the Chargers traveling
Chargers at
to
the Bengals.
Cincinnati. That's going to be a very exciting game. Take me through it.
Well, Lewis, I know you mentioned about the Chargers eking into this contender conversation with these guys like the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, but I just can't trust their coaching at all, Lewis. Just how Brandon Staley has played the past two or 3 years as his head coach for this team, how bad that defense is, Lewis. Like we said, that when it gets to those cold months and you're talking about rushing defense against rushing offenses, the Chargers rushing defense is the worst in 60 years. And so I like the Bengals with Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine to run all over this Chargers team. And I mean, Justin Herbert, this will be a great experience for him to play in his first playoff game. But I think that Joe Burrow and their offense has been heating up the past couple of weeks, and I think they win that game.
Yeah, and then you bring up a good point about the rushing defense, but the rushing offense for the Chargers is more distressing in my mind because in this playoff game, at hypothetical game against the Bengals, which I hope will be a thing, because I think these two teams are going to match up beautifully. But you are not going to be able to run the ball at all against this Bengals team. How your roster is currently, structured, where you threw over 50 passes in a win against the Dolphins last week, in a game where if you win, you're supposed to throw less because you're running the ball, but they couldn't run the ball at all, and just putting so much of the game on Justin Herbert. And the Bengals have a good defense with good pass rushers, good run defense with DJ Reader. So they have to beat the Bengals over the top. And there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be a lot of crazy fourth downs. But I agree with you. I do think the Bengals would win that matchup just because on the flip side, the Bengals haven't run the ball very well. I didn't pay attention much to that Browns game last week, but, they covered and they won that game as they were supposed to. Deshaun Watson looked awful in that matchup. But let's go down to your last matchup, Laraib. You have the Baltimore Ravens traveling to Tennessee, two teams that are not playing their best football right now, Laraib. What will decide this matchup in your mind?
Well, I think if Lamar Jackson plays in this one, I think that they can get it done. The Titans' defense has really been helping out this season. But their offense with Derrick Henry slowing down a little bit. These two teams, Lewis, this is not the first time they would match up in the playoffs. They have a really, really bad taste in their mouth whenever these two teams match up. And the Ravens came out on top last time, and so I like them to win this one once again. I know the Ravens' defense is slowly starting to get better every single week. And with Lamar Jackson back in the lineup, I think he provides the X factor in this one to get it done against the Titans team, who really is lacking an identity, or not an identity, but somebody besides Derrick Henry to do something on offense. And so I like the Ravens to win it on the road and a potential upset.
I think these two teams their strengths go against the other team's strength. Like the Titans have a really good running game, but the Ravens have a really good run defense. And vice versa. The Ravens, their big thing is the running game. The Titans have a good front seven, but the secondary for the Titans has been awful. We saw it get completely torched by Jalen Hurts and then completely torched by Trevor Lawrence last week. And it's not getting any healthier. Christian Fulton is in and out of the lineup. And there's that secondary is awful right now. So this is probably the best matchup they can get out of all the other AFC teams because Lamar has kind of struggled this year and to really beat teams with his arm, especially with the lack of weapons on that side of the ball. So I think it'll be a very interesting matchup. And yeah, this is the third time, if this matchup were to happen, that Lamar would face off against the Titans in his playoff career. He's beaten them once. He's lost to them once. So this is the rubber match. Let's see what happens. But I think that this playoffs now every year, Laraib, in the wild card round, there is a team that's supposed to win that loses a big home game. Now we both have the chalk winning because I do think the Ravens also move on. Now, out of these three matchups, what is the most likely upset in your opinion?
The most likely upset, I think, will go to the Titans.
Say it. Oh,
We'll go to the Titans. I mean, this Ravens team, we've talked about how depleted they've been on offense all season long. If the Titans can just control the ball and, get their little play action going to Treylon Burks and Austin Hooper and all those guys and keep it away from Lamar Jackson, then, maybe they can really win that game realistically, Lewis. The Chargers, like I said, against the Bengals, I think, are just playing too well right now, and they probably won't get it done in that one. And the Jets, Bills, you could potentially say that could be one.
That's my pick.
That's your
I
pick?
think that's the most likely upset just because, the Jets have a really good defense that, in any game, defense win championships. And in a one-off playoff game, single elimination, if you have a few bad turnovers here and there, and it's going to be cold weather, but guess what? The Bills are going to be cold too. The Jets have played in the cold. They know how to play in the cold. And I think with this unpredictable Jets offense, if they get some things going, now the offensive line does scare me against this Bills pass rush. But, if they can just get a few balls to bounce their way in the turnover margin, that is a potential upset in my opinion. Now, yes, you have the smart pick because the Titans are, a better team, but not a better team than the Ravens, but probably the best pick in terms of the standings. But we can both agree, and at least I can say, that the Chargers matchup is probably the toughest in that instance. But let's move on, Laraib, to your divisional round. We're going to go a little far here. We're trying to pick a Super Bowl winner. You have the Bills facing off against the Bengals
and the Chiefs
facing the Ravens. Break it down.
Well, Lewis, I think Kansas City at home off a bye against the Ravens team, which is depleted. They're going to have to eke out a win against this Titans team somehow against Derrick Henry. And now
a tough team.
And I have to face Patrick Mahomes. Now, we've always said Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes would be, this premier battle. But it looks like Patrick Mahomes has fallen down the standings just a little bit, Lewis, over there in the AFC quarterback standings. I think Patrick Mahomes just dominates this Ravens team, which secondary can be exposed with guys like Marlon Humphrey not playing like his usual self, and Marcus Peters definitely not playing like his usual self. And I think the Kansas City Chiefs win that game easily at home against the Ravens team.
I mean, yeah, I think you said Patrick Mahomes falling that ladder. I think you meant Lamar Jackson. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I was confused for a second there because Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. No debate. No debate at this point. Now, he threw 3 picks against the Broncos. That's a game he probably slept on Tuesday real well during practice. He probably played ping pong on Wednesday. Probably went out with the family on Thursday. And then he's like, oh, yeah, the Broncos. Then he broke down film on Friday. But, they won that game pretty easily. Jerry Jeudy, shout out. But that matchup between the Chiefs and the Ravens, I think the Chiefs get another AFC Championship playoff berth. This will be the 4th straight year that they are hosting the AFC playoff or AFC Championship game, which is wild in my opinion. But yeah, I just don't think this Ravens offense can match up with the Chiefs offense, especially with a week off a bye. Chiefs offense, has really been humming this season. I think they get this game. But let's go to the next matchup. I think this one's going to be very good. Bills, Bengals. I think I know where you would be leaning in this matchup, Laraib. And why is it the Bengals?
Well, Joe Shiesty, Joe Cool has just been really, really impressing me, Lewis. Now, if this happens, Lewis, this will be the second time these teams would be matching up this season because they have a Monday night game coming up later this year. And so, either one of the loser of that game will have some big, big film to break down this one. But I really like the Bengals, Lewis. Like you said, the Bills, we really like guys like Stephon Diggs and, Gabe Davis had 4 touchdowns against the Chiefs last year in one game, but they lack sometimes their offense is really hit or miss, Lewis. And sometimes they miss really, really often. Like the Jets this week, they struggled in that first half. It was really, really close. And now this Bengals team, like I said, getting hot at the right time, great rushing attack, great passing attack. They're very, very balanced. And that defense has, a lot of sneaky guys. Last year, a lot of people were sleeping on this Bengals defense because they don't have any household names, Lewis. But they got some guys in there who can make plays, Lewis, all across the board. I know your guy, Trey Hendrickson, came over from the Saints 2 years ago, and he's really done a number for that defensive line. And so I really like them against the Bills team, even though they're on the road. And I like the Bengals to win. And we'll have a Kansas City versus Cincinnati rematch in the AFC Championship.
Well, you bring up a good point about that Monday Night Football game, Laraib, because if the Bengals win, both these teams would be at 4 losses. And if the Bengals win out, this game could potentially be in Cincinnati, which would be huge for the Bengals. And yeah, I think this is one of the best games of the entire playoffs. Probably not as good as the next matchup, against the Chiefs, because that's always the measuring stick in the conference on whether or not you're getting to the Super Bowl. But I think it's the Bills' year. Now, I really want to see how this Monday Night Football matchup plays out, but I think that this Bills team, it's going to be such a good game. I don't even want to predict it now because obviously we're not doing predictions. We're just talking about how these matchups would go. But I think the biggest matchup would be Josh Allen against Lou Anarumo, who I was singing his praises last week for being a great defensive mind, and he did it again against the Browns last week. I think against, this new Bills offense without Brian Daboll, I think he can have a serious matchup advantage in that department. Now, this Bills defensive front without Von Miller, he is a great playmaker, but his biggest trait is these big games, him showing up in big moments to make a big play. And, this will be the game where he has that huge strip sack in the fourth quarter and just secures the Bills for the game-winning field goal or something like that. Without him, his presence will be severely missed. And I think you get Joe Mixon back and you're able to run the ball against this Bills front and kind of take the pressure off Joe Burrow. The Bengals could be going to the AFC Championship against the Chiefs, Laraib. And that game, in my opinion, is just, Mahomes owns Burrow, right? You said it yourself. Is that going to be the case again?
Does Patrick Mahomes go 0-4 against Joe Burrow? And I say yes, he does.
Wow.
Lou Anarumo, like you said, he just has his number and he knows how to, he's dialed it up. He dials up that blitz against Patrick Mahomes and he sends the house on him, and just his play design, how they rush sometimes, play 8 in coverage and only rush 3, and how they mix up the different schemes for Patrick Mahomes. And it really throws him off his game, Lewis. As great as Patrick Mahomes has been, it looks like this guy has his number. And so I like the Bengals to go into Kansas City once again and get it done, because they just have playmakers everywhere, Lewis. And if that offensive line, like you said, the chemistry just gets better and better, and if they're fully meshed together in the AFC Championship, Lewis, I think they can get it done against Patrick Mahomes, who severely misses Tyreek Hill in this game.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how these things are going to shake up? Who knows who's going to be playing? We pray for no injuries. We pray that this is our matchup, because I agree with you. I'd love to see this matchup. Now, I think the Chiefs would win. I just don't think they can beat them 3 times in a row and steal another Super Bowl trip from this prideful organization, the Kansas City Chiefs, who have lost a Super Bowl, lost 2 AFC championships, and only won it once so far in the Mahomes era. I think they get to it again, but I can't wait to see how all these matchups unfold, what teams go through. There will be upsets, we know that, but this has been an extremely exciting AFC. And one last question, is the Super Bowl champion going to be an AFC team?
I mean, that is really, really hard to predict, Lewis. I really like the 49ers more than any team in the NFC.
Wow. Okay.
I just the statement they put on the past 2 games at home, Lewis, has been outstanding. I know the Eagles are playing really, really well, but having the number 1 defense in the league, Lewis, is a really, really big advantage for you. And Brock Purdy, like we said, no turnovers for him, just got the ball into playmakers' hands and they got it done. And so I think that the winner of this year's Super Bowl will be from the NFC.
Wow.
I think the defense coming from all 3 contenders over there, from the Eagles and the Cowboys and the 49ers, I think the defense wins championships. My Seahawks went to 2 Super Bowls doing that and won 1 doing that. And so I really believe in having a great defense. And I think one of those 3 teams can get it done against, either one of these high-powered offenses in the Chiefs, Bills, or Bengals.
Well, I got to agree with you right there, Laraib. I do think it's an NFC team, and you're right. Defense wins championships, and especially in this, in the playoffs in these cold weather climates, and in all these situations. Now, the Super Bowl is going to be in Arizona, so who really cares about all that? But may the best team win, and we'll get there whenever we get there. We're super excited for the playoffs coming up. We spent this entire episode breaking down the AFC, who we think is making the playoffs, and who we think is going to win these specific matchups. But we're just excited to break it all down. Before we go, let's focus on
Well,
next
Lewis, I
week's
have
game.
one more question for you about this
Go ahead.
AFC playoff race. And so we've been talking about all these teams, Lewis. But one team I want to focus on is the Tennessee Titans. And now we both predicted that they will win their division and they will probably be the 4th seed. And now we were talking about how this Bengals and Ravens are going back and forth, but the 5th seed will play the Titans. Now, would you rather play the Titans, Lewis, or would you rather play a team like the Jets or the Chargers?
So you're saying that would I rather
would
the road in the playoffs or play a home game? I think it's no question, Laraib. You bring up an interesting point, and strategy is a huge part in how these teams think about it, because you're right. Would I rather play a Tennessee team who's been banged up and playing like crap and kind of, limping their way into the playoffs, who would probably be an easy win? Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty good. But like I mentioned earlier, Laraib, if the Bengals can beat the Bills in this matchup coming up and run the table against the Ravens, they could potentially end up with a 2 seed this year. And unfortunately, the Ravens couldn't get the job done against the Bills early in the season, so it's a harder ask for that squad. And maybe if they're put in a situation, they would rather face a team like the Titans and move on, because, Lamar would probably just like to move on and get more playoff wins under his belt for that check coming up. But yeah, would I rather face the Chargers or the Titans? In a vacuum, I'd rather face the Titans. But would I rather face the Titans on the road or the Chargers in my building? I'd rather play in my building regardless.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up as an interesting point. Talk
It
about
is. You're right.
advantage. Some of the advantages that you get from losing in certain situations. But I just want to see your take on that, Lewis. But let's move on to Thursday night football. Now, this is a crucial game, Lewis. We have the San Francisco 49ers going into Seattle to play my Seattle Seahawks. Is going to be a huge game for both of these teams. Seahawks still statistically not out from winning their division, Lewis, and this could go a long way, and either making the playoffs or maybe even winning the division, Lewis. And so we have the San Francisco 49ers at -3.5 on the road, Lewis. Now, what do you think the Seahawks can do in this game to win it?
Oh, that's a very interesting number. They need to stop the run. And it's so hard to ask of this Seahawks team right now. I understand that. And they have not been able to do that all season. But they need to stop the run against this 49ers team and make Brock Purdy win a road divisional game, which is a tough ask for any quarterback in the NFL. So can he do that? Now, Deebo Samuel will not play in this game. Nasty high ankle sprain. We hope he's fine. We hope he'll be back for come playoff time. But, with these receivers, with these weapons, Christian McCaffrey's been playing amazing in this stretch with the 49ers so far. I think the 49ers will get it done in this one. Like you said, you think they're playing like the best team in the NFL. It's hard not to argue that. And the Seahawks have not been playing good football. But this is the Seahawks season here we're talking about. They lose this game, it's going to be super tough for them to climb out of this hole they put themselves in. And if they can't run the ball against the 49ers, I don't see them getting, this offensive line. Two offensive tackle rookies have been playing amazing. But now against this 49ers front, who already embarrassed them in week 2, I think I'd give the edge to the 49ers in this matchup, Laraib.
Oh, man, this is really tough to predict, Lewis, because, this is a kitchen sink game for the Seahawks. Like you mentioned, if you lose this one, it's going to be really, really tough to get back in. And if there's any one of these games on your schedule, against the Chiefs or the Jets or the 49ers, I think this is one of the games that they can win, Lewis, at home against a divisional opponent. I'm not going to pick them as my upset of the week, but I will pick the Seahawks to win this game. I'll pick a different team for my upset, but I think the Seahawks at home Hopefully Kenneth Walker will be back for this game. Like I mentioned, with no Debo out there, it's really going to lean on Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle to get it done. And I think the Seahawks, they put everything into this game and they get a win at home. The 12th man is going to be roaring for this one, Lewis. And Pete Carroll has always had Kyle Shanahan's number. And so we'll see how this one plays out. Brock Purdy and the 12th man, who will win? I'm picking the 12th man in this one. I like the Seahawks.
Wow.
Defensive battle. The Seahawks win it 24-21 at home.
You bring up all the great rah-rah points that I knew you would, but I got to disagree with you, Laraib. I think the 49ers win it. They're just a better team right now, and I just don't see them. This Seahawks team, which their weaknesses have been so glaring the past few weeks, that a team like the Panthers could beat them, which was a horrible loss, especially in Seattle. So off a short week, I think the 49ers are just a more prepared team. So I do have the 49ers winning this one 31-20. Gino comes back down to earth a little bit, unfortunately. But that'll do it for today's episode, Laraib. Super excited to see what the games coming up next week are. You can see that in our next episode dropping on Thursday. But besides that, all of our links are going to be in our bio below. So you can check us out on all different types of social media platforms to see when we're posting updates and any news we have for you. Anything else you want to say before we head out here, Laraib?
No, Lewis, I think that's going to be the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.